It was my mom's retirement birthday dinner. 65 years old, 30 people, a private room at a mid-range restaurant she'd been talking about for weeks. Nothing fancy but nice enough that everyone behaved like it mattered. White tablecloths, assigned seats, the kind of place where the server introduces themselves like they're part of the evening. I came in holding my daughter Maya's hand. She was 8, wearing the blue dress she'd picked herself because it had pockets. She was excited. Not about the food, about seeing her cousins. Vanessa was already there. My sister has a way of arriving early and acting like she owns the room. Perfect hair, loud laugh, designer bag placed carefully on the chair like it needed its own space. Her kids were spread out around the table, devices in hand, completely ignoring each other. Maya spotted them immediately. "Can I sit next to them?" she asked, already letting go of my hand. I nodded. "Go ahead." She pulled out a chair next to her cousin and sat down without thinking twice. Kids don't calculate social hierarchies. They just sit. That's when Vanessa noticed. She stood up so fast, her chair scraped the floor. People turned. She smiled, first the tight kind that doesn't reach the eyes, and walked over to Maya like she was correcting a mistake on a seating chart. "Oh no," she said lightly. "Not there." She put a hand on her own daughter's shoulder and gently steered her away, then motioned to the other two. "Come on, you're sitting over here, with family." She paused just long enough to look directly at me. "The other table is for guests." Then she laughed. A small laugh. The kind people use when they want you to laugh too. Maya looked up at me confused. Vanessa leaned down slightly and said it clear as day, not even lowering her voice. "You know how it is. Poverty might be contagious." The room didn't go silent. That's the part people get wrong. Forks still clinked. Someone asked for another drink. My mom was talking to an aunt at the other end of the table, smiling unaware or pretending to be. But something shifted. Maya stood there for a second, not moving. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why. She just picked up her little purse and walked to the small card table they'd set up near the wall. A table meant for extra plates, for overflow, for people who didn't quite fit. She sat down alone. 8-year-old feet, not even touching the floor, smoothing the skirt of her dress, like she'd done something wrong. I felt it then. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter, something sharp. I walked over to her, leaned down, and asked if she was okay. She nodded. "I'm fine." That's what kids say when they don't want to make things worse. I squeezed her shoulder and walked back to the main table. Vanessa was already seated again, pouring herself a glass of wine like nothing had happened. No one said a word. Not my mom, not my cousins, not the uncle who'd watched the whole thing with his eyebrows raised and then gone back to his phone. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The way my sister looked so comfortable, the way my daughter was pretending to be invisible, the way silence can be louder than shouting. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't flip the table. I just sat down, picked up my water, took a slow sip, and focused on keeping my shoulders relaxed. If you're watching this, and you've ever been the only one in the room willing to say something uncomfortable, let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear the full story of how this family drama actually played out, go ahead and subscribe. It helps more than you think. My daughter's fingers stayed hooked in my sleeve later that night, as people started talking all at once, and I let the noise roll past me without responding to any of it. Maya leaned closer. "Are we in trouble?" she asked quietly. "No," I said. "We're just eating dinner." She nodded, satisfied with that answer, and started tearing her bread into small pieces. Kids move on faster than adults. They don't replay moments in their heads the same way we do. I did. Because that wasn't the first time my sister had made it clear where she thought we belonged. It was just the first time she'd said it out loud in front of everyone. Growing up, Vanessa was always the one people pointed to. Straight A's, cheer captain, the girl who knew how to smile for photos and talk to adults without sounding like a kid. Teachers loved her. Neighbors remembered her name. Family friends asked about her future like it was already decided. I was 3 years younger and quieter. Not shy, just uninterested in performing. When I told everyone I was joining the Navy, Vanessa laughed like I'd said I was moving to join a circus. She said, you're not exactly military. She meant I wasn't flashy. I wasn't competitive in the way she understood. I didn't chase approval. My parents didn't try to stop me, but they didn't brag either. Vanessa's college acceptance letters went on the fridge. My enlistment paperwork went in a drawer. At holidays, relatives asked her about internships and study abroad programs. They asked me if I was still doing that Navy thing. When Vanessa met her husband, the family reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. He worked in commercial real estate, wore tailored suits, talked confidently about markets and investments. He looked like success in a way people recognized. When I brought Daniel home, he shook hands too firmly and wore work boots to dinner. He worked construction on federal contracts. He came home tired. He didn't talk much about his job because there wasn't much to say beyond long days and early mornings. Vanessa smiled politely and asked what his long-term plan was. Daniel smiled back and said, "Work." I married him anyway. That was the first time I noticed the shift. Vanessa stopped teasing and started correcting. The comments became quieter, sharper. "You could have done better," she said once, half joking. "You always settle." Daniel never heard those comments. I never told him. There was no point. We were happy. That was enough for me. Then he died. A workplace accident. One moment he was sending me a photo of a bad lunch from a food truck. The next, I was standing in a hospital hallway signing paperwork I barely understood. Vanessa showed up to the funeral in black heels and sunglasses and hugged me hard enough to make it look sincere. She told everyone how strong I was, how brave, how she couldn't imagine raising a child alone. That sympathy lasted about a week. After that, the comments changed again. "You're going to have to be careful now," she said. "It's expensive raising a kid on one income. You'll probably need help," she added. "I hope Mom doesn't feel obligated." At family dinners, she talked about private schools while glancing at Maya. She talked about summer camps that cost more than my monthly mortgage. She didn't say I couldn't afford them. She didn't have to. My mom never corrected her. She'd change the subject or laugh awkwardly like Vanessa had just told a slightly inappropriate joke. I told myself it didn't matter. I had a job, I had benefits, I had stability. Maya had everything she needed. What I didn't realize was how closely children listen. On the drive home one night, Maya asked me why Aunt Vanessa always talked about money. "Some people think it's important," I said. "Is it?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not like that." She seemed satisfied, but the question stuck with me. Back at the birthday dinner, my mom had finally walked over and sat across from us. She smoothed her napkin like she needed something to do with her hands. "She's under a lot of stress," my mom had said, justifying Vanessa's behavior. I looked around the room. Plates half-eaten. Conversation strained. A birthday cake waiting to be cut, like nothing had happened. Vanessa had always known how to play that dynamic. She could say something cutting and walk away clean because someone else would handle the fallout. Usually that someone was me. Not because I was weak, because I didn't care enough to fight. But sitting there watching my daughter act like being pushed aside was normal. Something shifted. Not anger, not even resentment. Just clarity. This wasn't about sibling rivalry. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about Vanessa. It was about what my daughter was learning in real time. I didn't say much on the drive home from the birthday, neither did she. The radio played softly, some forgettable pop song, and the normalcy of it felt strange after the way the evening had twisted itself inside out. When I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, she was watching the streetlights pass like nothing big had happened. That's when I knew she was processing it in her own way. I've spent most of my adult life learning how to do that too. People assume military service makes you loud or aggressive. In reality, it teaches you when to shut up, when to observe, when to wait. I didn't start out in logistics because it sounded impressive. I landed there because I was good at patterns and details, and because I didn't mind paperwork that made other people's eyes glaze over. Contracts, compliance, supply chains, the unglamorous side of keeping things running. You learn quickly that nothing falls apart all at once. There are always signs first, numbers that don't line up, deadlines that get pushed, excuses that repeat themselves with slightly different wording. In the Navy, reacting without information can get people hurt, so you learn to document first and speak later. That habit didn't turn off when I went home. At family gatherings, I noticed things Vanessa probably thought no one else saw. The way she talked in circles when money came up, how she redirected conversations away from specifics, how her stories about trips and renovations never quite matched the timing. I didn't call her out. I didn't correct her. I filed it away. That's another thing the military teaches you. Not every piece of information is meant to be used right away. Back at home, I tucked Maya into bed and sat on the edge of her mattress while she talked about school. She told me about a spelling test and a friend who'd traded snacks at lunch. She didn't mention dinner, not once. When she finally fell asleep, I stayed there a few extra minutes listening to her breathe. The house was quiet in that way it only gets late at night, when even the refrigerator seems to hum softer. I thought about how easily Vanessa had said those words. Poverty might be contagious. Like it was a joke. Like it was a warning. Like my child was something to be kept at a distance. I didn't feel angry. I felt focused. The next morning, I put on my uniform and drove to base. The routine helped. Coffee, gate check. The familiar rhythm of a place where expectations were clear and behavior had consequences. At work, I did what I always did. Reviewed reports, answered questions, helped a junior sailor sort out a housing issue that had been stressing him out for weeks. That's when I saw the name. Not Vanessa's, her husband's. It was on a document related to a property dispute. Nothing dramatic. Just a line item buried in a stack of digital paperwork that crossed my desk because it involved off-base housing. I didn't react. I didn't even stop scrolling right away. But later during a break, I pulled it back up. Public records are exactly what they sound like. Anyone can access them if they know where to look. There's nothing sneaky about it. No passwords, no special clearance, just patience. I told myself I was only curious, that I was checking because it was there, that it didn't mean anything. The address caught my eye. The same one Vanessa loved to post about. The front porch at sunset, the backyard during parties, the kitchen she'd remodeled twice in 5 years. The status wasn't good. Notice of default. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen for a moment. Not shocked, just thoughtful. A missed payment doesn't mean much on its own. People fall behind. Things happen. But patterns matter. I closed the file and went back to work. For weeks after that, I didn't look again. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to. I already knew what a notice of default meant. I'd seen enough cases like it to know how they usually went. Vanessa kept posting like nothing was wrong. New outfits, throwback vacation photos, vague captions about exciting changes ahead. At a family barbecue, she talked about upgrading their cars. At another dinner, she mentioned switching schools because the kids needed more challenge. I listened, I nodded, I asked neutral questions. That's another skill you pick up over time. How to let people talk themselves into revealing more than they intend. At one point, she mentioned her husband working from home more. Said it was about flexibility. I filed that away too. None of it made me feel superior. If anything, it made me tired. I didn't want to be right. I didn't want to know. Knowing creates responsibility, and I'd spent years avoiding that particular burden, where my sister was concerned. It was easier to let her believe I was oblivious. That night, Maya asked if we could invite her cousins over sometime. Sure, I said. We'll see. She smiled, satisfied. She didn't see the line that had been drawn for her. She didn't know how close she'd come to learning that being treated poorly was something you just accepted to keep other people comfortable. I sat at the kitchen table after she went to bed, laptop open, but untouched, staring at the reflection of the overhead light in the screen. In the Navy, we talk a lot about accountability, about how rank doesn't excuse behavior, about how ignoring small problems is how you end up with disasters. I thought about Vanessa, about my mom, about the room full of relatives who'd said nothing. I hadn't done anything wrong by staying quiet, but I was starting to understand something I'd missed before. Silence isn't neutral. Sometimes it's permission. I closed the laptop without opening anything else and stood up. There were still dishes in the sink and a uniform to prep for the next day. Normal life waiting to be handled. As I turned off the kitchen light, I realized I wasn't angry at my sister for what she'd said. I was angry at myself for how long I'd let it go on. I set my coffee down harder than I meant to the next morning and noticed it only because a few drops sloshed over the rim. That's usually how it starts. Not with panic, not with drama. Just a small break in routine that makes you pay attention. I didn't wake up thinking about my sister. I woke up thinking about a supply audit that was overdue and a sailor who still hadn't turned in his paperwork. Normal problems, manageable ones. But the name I'd seen on that housing document sat in the back of my mind like a loose thread. By mid-morning, I was helping a junior petty officer navigate an issue with off-base housing. He was stressed, talking fast, convinced he was about to lose everything because of one missed payment. I let him talk until he ran out of words, then walked him through the process step by step. Nothing happens all at once, I told him. There's always a timeline. That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. Later during lunch, I pulled up the county records again. Same document, same status, still public, still real. I didn't dig, not yet. I checked the date, then the previous entry, then one more. This wasn't new. The notice had been filed weeks before the dinner, long before my daughter was told she didn't belong at the table. I closed the browser and went back to work. That's the thing people misunderstand about information. Knowing something doesn't mean you're obligated to act on it. Not immediately. Timing matters. Context matters. And family complicates everything. Over the next few weeks, life went on like it always did. Maya had school projects. I had early mornings and late afternoons. My mom called once to ask if I was feeling better about the dinner, like it had been a stomach bug that would pass if we didn't poke at it. Vanessa didn't mention it at all. She kept posting photos online. Throwback vacations, smiling selfies, captions about gratitude and growth. She tagged brands. She tagged locations. She kept the illusion alive with impressive consistency. At a cousin's engagement party, she cornered me near the bar and started talking about plans to renovate their kitchen again. "We're thinking marble this time," she said. "The quartz just doesn't feel elevated enough." I nodded, took a sip of soda. Let her talk. She didn't ask how Maya was. She didn't ask how I was doing. She talked the way people do when they're trying to convince themselves of something. A week later, my mom mentioned that Vanessa's husband had been home a lot. "He says it's remote work," my mom said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Isn't that nice?" "Sure," I said. I didn't correct her. I didn't ask questions. I just listened. The pattern started to fill in on its own. Another public filing popped up. Different issue, same address, same name, then another. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt a dull kind of confirmation, like when a forecast turns out to be right and you still wish it hadn't rained. I never printed anything, never saved screenshots, never took notes. I didn't need to. Once you've worked with timelines long enough, you recognize the shape of one forming. Vanessa, meanwhile, got louder. She talked about schools more often, about how competitive things were, about how hard it was to keep up standards. At one family dinner, she complained that people who didn't prioritize excellence held their kids back. I watched Maya push peas around her plate and kept my mouth shut. That silence felt heavier than it used to. One afternoon, Maya came home quiet. Not upset, just thoughtful. Aunt Vanessa says her kids might change schools, she said, kicking off her shoes. Oh yeah, I asked. Yeah. She said some kids don't belong in places like that. I stopped wiping the counter and looked at her. What did you think she meant? I asked. Maya shrugged. I don't know, maybe kids like me. That was the moment I stopped pretending this was just adult nonsense. Kids don't miss subtext, they absorb it. They internalize it. They learn where they're allowed to sit without being told directly. That night I opened my laptop again. This time I didn't stop at the first document. I didn't rush. I didn't spiral. I approached it the way I approach everything else that matters. Slowly, methodically, one piece at a time. I checked dates, cross-referenced addresses, looked at filings that were openly available to anyone with patience and a decent internet connection. What I saw wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a secret empire crumbling overnight. It was debt, missed payments, restructured loans, delays. A lifestyle stretched thin and held together with appearances. The kind of situation that can survive quietly if no one asks questions. The kind that collapses fast once reality catches up. I closed the laptop before midnight. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. I thought about all the times Vanessa had spoken down to me, about the way my mom had smoothed it over, about the way my daughter was learning what silence meant. In the Navy, we don't fix problems by ignoring them. We don't wait for things to break completely before stepping in. We document. We assess. We decide. I wasn't planning anything, not yet. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to embarrass my sister. I didn't want to blow up my family. I just wanted clarity. And clarity has a way of changing what you're willing to tolerate. The next weekend, Vanessa hosted a birthday party for one of her kids. Bounce house, catered food, gift bags lined up neatly by the door. I watched parents arrive, admire the house, compliment the setup. Vanessa soaked it in. I stood near Maya, who was laughing with her cousins like nothing had ever been wrong, and wondered how long that illusion could hold. Because once you see the cracks, you can't unsee them. And once you understand how fragile someone's performance really is, their cruelty stops feeling powerful. It starts feeling desperate. I stood near the back fence at the party, holding a paper plate I hadn't touched, and watched Vanessa work the crowd like it was a second job. She laughed loudly at the right moments. She touched people's arms when she talked. She made sure everyone noticed the caterer, the decorations, the bounce house that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Every detail was deliberate. Every compliment fed something in her. "This place is amazing," one of the parents said, looking around. Vanessa smiled. "It's a lot of work, but we want our kids to have the best." I caught her eye for half a second. She looked away first. Maya was running around with her cousin's hair coming loose, cheeks flushed. She looked happy, normal, like a kid who didn't know she was supposed to feel less than. That contrast sat heavy in my chest. Vanessa moved through the yard, dropping hints the way she always did. A comment about how competitive the private school admissions process had become. A joke about how people didn't plan properly anymore. A remark about how exhausting it was to carry standards for everyone else. No one challenged her. They nodded, they smiled, they laughed politely. I listened without reacting. That was the hardest part, not speaking, letting the performance run its course. At one point, she ended up standing next to me by the drink table. "You've been quiet," she said, pouring herself a sparkling water. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said. She tilted her head, studying me. "Work stress." Something like that. She smiled again, but it didn't land. "Well, if you ever need advice on managing things, budgets, schools, all that, I've learned a lot." There it was, wrapped in concern, delivered like a favor. "I'm good," I said. "Thanks," she shrugged. "Suit yourself." She walked away before I could say anything else, already scanning the yard for her next audience. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. The lies weren't dramatic. They were small and constant. 1,000 tiny misrepresentations stacked on top of each other, reinforced by people who didn't want to look too closely. That's how it works most of the time. Not with explosions, with nods. On the drive home, Maya fell asleep in the back seat, her head tilted awkwardly against the door. I adjusted her seatbelt at a stoplight and watched her chest rise and fall. She looked peaceful, safe. I thought about the way Vanessa spoke about standards, about who belonged where, about who had earned a seat at the table. At home, after I carried Maya inside and tucked her in, I sat at the kitchen table again. Same spot, same chair, laptop open. This time I didn't hesitate. I pulled up the records methodically, not out of curiosity anymore, out of responsibility. Not because I wanted to use them, but because I needed to understand the full picture. I checked timelines, property filings, legal notices, everything publicly available, everything boring enough that most people would never bother. The story was consistent. Missed payments weren't recent. They'd been building quietly for over a year. Loans refinanced, deadlines extended, fees stacked on top of fees. The cars Vanessa loved to mention leased, long-term, high monthly payments. The school she bragged about tuition notices marked overdue. Multiple months. Her husband's name appeared again, this time tied to a court filing related to his employment. Not a promotion, not a transition. A termination, for cause. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't bad luck. This was someone drowning while insisting they were swimming laps. I closed the laptop and stood up restless, walked to the window. The street was quiet. A neighbor's porch light flicked on across the way. I thought about how easily Vanessa had said those words at the restaurant. Poverty might be contagious. She wasn't afraid of being poor. She was afraid of being seen, and she decided the best way to protect herself was to push everyone else down first. The next few family interactions followed the same pattern. Vanessa was louder, more opinionated, more invested in drawing lines between people. At a holiday planning call, she made a comment about keeping things small this year and joked about not wanting too many extras. I knew exactly who she meant. I stayed quiet. My mom called me afterward. "You know, she didn't mean anything by that," she said. "I know what she meant," I replied. "She's just stressed." "Stress doesn't make you cruel," I said. "It just reveals what you're willing to excuse." My mom didn't respond to that. Maya asked me one night why Aunt Vanessa didn't like her very much. I didn't correct her wording. "Kids know." "She has her own problems," I said carefully. "Did I do something wrong?" Maya asked. "No," I said. "You didn't." She nodded, accepting that, and went back to her homework. I stayed at the table longer than necessary after she went to bed, staring at the same paperwork I'd already reviewed. I wasn't planning a confrontation. I wasn't rehearsing lines. I wasn't plotting anything. But I was done pretending I didn't know what was happening. In the Navy, we talk about situational awareness, about understanding not just what's happening, but why, about recognizing when a situation has crossed from uncomfortable into unsafe. Vanessa's behavior wasn't just annoying. It was shaping how my daughter saw herself, and that was something I couldn't ignore anymore. The next family gathering was already on the calendar. Another dinner. Another room full of people willing to look the other way. I didn't circle the date. I didn't make a plan. I just acknowledged quietly that if the same line was crossed again, I wouldn't step back from it. Because once you see the truth, clearly pretending you don't becomes a choice. And I was finished choosing that. Maya's hand tightened around mine the second we walked into the restaurant, not because she was scared, but because she was paying attention. It was another family dinner. Different occasion, same group chat, deciding the place, the time, the seating. I hadn't argued about any of it. I never did. Arguing only mattered if you thought someone was listening. Vanessa was already there, of course. She always was. Same confident posture, same careful outfit, Same habit of scanning the room like she was checking her own reflection in other people's faces. Maya stayed close to my side as we approached the table. She didn't run ahead this time. She didn't ask where she could sit. She waited. That hurt more than the last time. We took our seats without anyone directing us. For a moment, everything felt almost normal. Menus opened. Water poured. Someone made a joke about traffic. Then Vanessa leaned over toward her kids. "Let's scoot in a little," she said casually. "Make room." Her daughter shifted her chair. Her son followed. A small gap opened between them and Maya, like an invisible line had been drawn again. Maya noticed immediately. She looked down at her chair, then up at me. "Is this okay?" she asked quietly. Vanessa answered before I could. "I just think it's better if we keep things consistent," she said, smiling. "You understand?" I didn't. But I also didn't interrupt her. "What do you mean?" Maya asked. Vanessa let out a soft laugh, the kind people use when they want to sound kind while saying something sharp. "Well, she said some families do things differently, and sometimes being around certain situations gives kids ideas." Ideas! That word landed hard, like what Maya asked. Vanessa hesitated just long enough to make it worse. About money. About expectations. I felt my jaw tighten before I could stop it. Maya nodded slowly, absorbing it. "Okay," she said, and reached for her purse. She didn't wait to be told where to go. She picked up her chair and carried it to the side table near the wall. Same table, same spot, different night. No one stopped her. Not my mom, not my aunts, not the cousins who watched with that same uncomfortable stillness I'd seen before. I stood up, not abruptly, not angrily, just enough to draw attention. "Maya," I said. "Hold on." She paused, looking at me with that careful expression kids get when they're trying to figure out if they've made a mistake. "Come back here," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong." Vanessa sighed, already annoyed. "You're making this into something it doesn't need to be." I looked at her, really looked at her. The tight smile, the controlled tone, the certainty that she would get away with this again. "No," I said. "You already did." She straightened. "I'm just protecting my kids," from what I asked. She didn't answer right away. She glanced around the table, checking for support. "From instability," she said finally. "From bad examples." The word hung there. I took a breath, slow, deliberate, the way I was trained into. "Maya." I said, keeping my voice steady. "Come sit next to me." She did immediately. Chair scraping softly against the floor. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being clear." She crossed her arms. "You always do this. You take everything personally." I smiled then. Not because it was funny, because it was done. "You're right," I said. "I do take it personally." When someone treats my child like she's a liability. My mom leaned forward. "Can we please not do this right now?" I didn't look at her. "We're already doing it." Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. "You keep talking about standards," I said. "About examples. About who belongs where." She scoffed. "I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything I said. I'm saying it plainly." The room had gone quiet again. Not awkward quiet. Alert quiet. "Maya." I said without breaking eye contact with my sister, "Do you want to hear something?" She nodded. I turned back to Vanessa. "You know the house you love to talk about," I said calmly. "The one you keep inviting people to admire." Her face changed instantly. Color draining. Eyes narrowing. "That's private," she snapped. "It's public record," I said. "The bank filed the foreclosure weeks ago." A couple of heads turned. Someone inhaled sharply. Vanessa laughed, sharp and short. "That's not true." "It is," I said. "You missed multiple payments. It's on file. Anyone can look it up." She stood up so fast, her chair tipped back. "You had no right," she said. "You're doing this out of jealousy." I shook my head. "I didn't say anything until you brought my daughter into it." My mom stood up too. "Enough! This is cruel." I finally looked at her. "Cruel," I said. Was watching an 8-year-old decide she didn't deserve a seat. Vanessa grabbed her purse. Her hands were shaking now. "This isn't over," she said. "I know," I replied. She turned and walked away, her kids scrambling to follow, confusion written all over their faces. The door closed behind them with a dull thud. No one spoke. Maya slid her hand into mine under the table. "Did I do something bad?" she asked. I squeezed her fingers. "No," I said. "You didn't." I felt every pair of eyes on us. Waiting, judging, recalculating. I picked up my menu again like nothing had happened. "What do you want to eat?" I asked Maya. She looked at the page, then back up at me. "Can I get the mac and cheese?" "Absolutely," I said. The server approached cautiously, eyes darting around the table. I ordered for both of us. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult anyone. I didn't threaten. I just stopped letting the behavior slide. And once that line was crossed out loud, it couldn't be erased again. The server's pen hovered over her notepad, waiting for someone to break the tension, and I gave her a small nod so she could do her job and move on. Once the food orders were taken, people slowly started talking again. Not real conversation, just noise. The kind meant to cover discomfort. My mom kept adjusting her necklace. And Uncle stared at his phone like it had suddenly become fascinating. A cousin leaned over and whispered something that made another one snort too loudly. No one looked at me directly. That's when I knew the room had already decided something. Not that I was wrong, just that I'd made things inconvenient. I focused on Maya, who was coloring the kids' menu like she always did, staying neatly inside the lines. She didn't seem shaken. She'd already moved on to the part of the evening that made sense to her. I hadn't. A few minutes passed before my mom leaned toward me. "You shouldn't have said that," she murmured. I didn't respond right away. I waited until Maya was focused on her crayons, then met my mom's eyes. "She shouldn't have said what she said," I replied. My mom shook her head. "You embarrassed her." "She embarrassed herself," I said. "I didn't invent anything. That's not the point," she said. "Family matters should stay private." I thought about all the times my finances had been discussed casually at this same table. The questions, the suggestions, the advice no one had been asked to give. "They weren't private when she talked about me," I said. My mom sighed. "You know she's sensitive." "That's not sensitivity," I said. "That's entitlement." She looked away, lips pressed together, and I knew that was as far as the conversation would go. Across the table, one of my aunts cleared her throat. "I didn't know about the house," she said carefully. "Is everything okay?" I didn't answer. I wasn't the one who needed to. Vanessa's absence was louder than her presence had been. The empty chairs where her family had been sitting felt intentional, like evidence. When the food arrived, I ate slowly, even though I wasn't particularly hungry. Maya chatted about school and asked if we could watch a movie when we got home. I told her we could. Halfway through the meal, my cousin leaned over. "Was that true?" she whispered. "About the foreclosure." "Yes," I said just as quietly. She blinked. "Wow." I didn't elaborate. That's another thing people don't realize about the truth. You don't have to push it. Once it's out, it spreads on its own. By the time dessert menus were passed around, everyone knew. Not the details. Just enough. Enough to change the tone. Enough to shift the balance. Vanessa came back 10 minutes later. Her eyes were red. Her posture was stiff. She walked in like someone bracing for impact, scanning the room before choosing a seat far from us. No one greeted her. She picked up her menu and pretended to read it. Her hands were still shaking. I didn't look at her, not because I was avoiding her, but because I didn't need to. I'd already said what needed to be said. That didn't stop her from speaking. "You're enjoying this," she said suddenly. her voice carrying just enough to draw attention. I turned to face her. No. She scoffed. Please. You've been waiting for this. For what I asked. For me to fail, she snapped. For everyone to see I'm not perfect. I didn't bring this up until you brought my daughter into it, I said. You did that. Not me. She laughed bitterly. You're always playing the victim. I'm not a victim, I said. I'm a parent. The distinction seemed to throw her off. You had no right to say any of that, she continued. That was personal. You made it personal when you decided my child was a bad influence, I replied. The table went quiet again. My mom stood up. Enough, she said sharply. Both of you. Vanessa looked at her hopeful. You crossed a line, my mom said, turning to me. I didn't argue. I didn't interrupt. You don't handle things like that, my mom continued. Not in front of everyone. I nodded once. Then maybe we shouldn't treat people like that in front of everyone either. My mom's mouth opened, then closed. Vanessa pushed her chair back. I don't need this, she said. I came here to celebrate. You came here to control the room, I said. It just didn't work tonight. She stared at me, eyes blazing. You think you're better than me now? No, I said. I think I'm done pretending I'm less. That landed. Vanessa grabbed her purse again, but this time she didn't leave. She just stood there, unsure, like she'd expected someone to stop her, and no one did. The check came. My mom reached for it, then hesitated. I put my card down without comment. No, my mom said quickly. I've got it. I didn't argue. I let her have that. When we stood to leave, Vanessa avoided my eyes. Her kids trailed behind her, quieter than usual, sensing something had shifted, even if they didn't understand what. Maya waved at them. They waved back. Outside, the air felt heavier than before. My mom walked beside me toward the parking lot. You didn't have to destroy her like that, she said. I stopped and turned to her. I didn't destroy anything. I stopped covering for it. She's still your sister, my mom said. I know, I replied. That's why I waited so long. My mom looked at me, then really looked like she was seeing something she'd missed. Maya tugged at my hand. Can we go now? Yes, I said. As we walked away, I felt something settle into place. Not relief, not triumph. Just the quiet understanding that once the truth is spoken plainly, it doesn't belong to you anymore, and neither does the outcome. The first thing that changed was how quiet my phone got. No more group texts from Vanessa, no comments on photos, no casual updates disguised as humble brags. It wasn't dramatic. It was just absence, the kind that shows up when someone realizes they don't control the room anymore. Life didn't slow down. It rarely does. I still had work. Maya still had school. Mornings were still rushed lunches, still packed half asleep. The difference was that the noise around my sister faded, and what replaced it was something more solid. Reality. It started small. My mom mentioned almost offhand that Vanessa's kids might be switching schools mid-year. She says it's temporary, my mom said, stirring her coffee. Just until things settle. Things like what I asked. My mom hesitated. Finances. That was new. She'd never used that word before. Not with Vanessa. A week later, a neighbor mentioned seeing a moving truck on Vanessa's street. Another relative asked if I'd heard anything about their cars. They're leasing, I said. That stuff adds up. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The foreclosure didn't happen overnight. It never does. Notices came first, then deadlines, then the quiet pressure of numbers that don't stop adding up just because you ignore them. Vanessa didn't call me, not once. Her kids did. Maya came home one afternoon and told me her cousin had been quieter at school lately, that she didn't bring lunch anymore, that she didn't talk about vacations. I listened carefully. How did that make you feel? I asked. She shrugged. Sad, but also, I don't know. Normal? That word again. Normal shouldn't be something a child has to relearn. At work, I kept my focus where it belonged. Reports, deadlines, people who needed help navigating systems that didn't care about feelings. I was good at that. I always had been. But even there, consequences have a way of showing up. A sailor stopped by my office one afternoon, clearly nervous. He was dealing with a potential eviction and wanted advice. "Don't wait," I told him. "The earlier you face it, the more options you have." He nodded, relieved. I wondered if anyone had ever said that to Vanessa. By the end of the month, the house was officially listed. No photos, no open houses, just a quiet entry buried among dozens of others. Vanessa stopped posting online entirely. That silence spoke louder than anything she'd ever said. My mom called one evening, her voice tight. "She's struggling," she said. "I know," I replied. "She's having to rent now, a smaller place. The kids are adjusting." "I know." There was a pause. "Do you feel bad I thought about that carefully?" "I feel bad for the kids," I said. "I don't feel bad that the pretending stopped." My mom didn't argue. The kids transferred to public school mid-semester. It wasn't smooth. It never is. New routines, new faces, new rules. Maya noticed immediately. "They sit by me sometimes," she said one night while doing homework. "They're nicer now." That landed harder than anything else. Vanessa's kids weren't mean before. They were just learning the rules they'd been given. The idea that some people belonged more than others. Without the props, those rules didn't hold. One afternoon, I ran into Vanessa at the grocery store. No makeup, hair pulled back, no designer bag, just a cart with basics, milk, bread, cereal. She froze when she saw me. I nodded. "Hey!" She nodded back. "Hey!" We stood there for a second, two women who'd shared a childhood, now navigating something entirely different. She looked tired. Not dramatic tired. The kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. "They're adjusting," she said, suddenly, not looking at me. "The kids." "I know I said. Maya's mentioned it." Her jaw tightened. "Of course she has." "I didn't rise to it." "This wasn't supposed to happen like this," Vanessa said quietly. I met her eyes. "How was it supposed to happen?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The answer didn't matter. Reality had already moved on. At the next family gathering, the tone was different. Smaller, quieter, no assigned seating, no subtle hierarchies enforced by chair placement. Vanessa sat near the end of the table. She didn't direct anyone. She didn't comment on schools or money or standards. My mom watched her carefully, like she was trying to recalibrate years of habit. When Maya got up to get dessert, no one stopped her. No one corrected her. She moved freely like a kid should. That mattered. I didn't feel victorious. I felt grounded. Consequences aren't a punishment. They're information. They tell you what was holding and what was just for show. Vanessa was learning that in real time. Later that night, my mom pulled me aside. "She's having a hard time," she said. "I know. She says you ruined her life." I took a breath. I didn't touch her finances. I didn't lie. I didn't create the situation. My mom looked conflicted. "But you said it out loud." "Yes," I said. "I did." She didn't respond right away. Watching someone face consequences isn't satisfying. It's sobering. It forces you to confront how easily things can fall apart when they're built on image instead of substance. I didn't celebrate. I didn't tell anyone I'd been right. I didn't bring it up again. There was nothing left to prove. What mattered was what had stopped. The comments, the looks. The way my daughter had learned to make herself smaller in rooms where she should have felt safe. That part was over. And that was enough to let everything else take whatever shape it needed to take. I was folding laundry when the knock came. Not a polite knock. Not rushed either. Just firm enough to mean whoever it was expected me to answer. Maya was in her room doing homework, the low murmur of a video playing in the background. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door without checking first. Vanessa stood there. No purse, No practiced smile. Just a hoodie that looked borrowed and eyes that had clearly cried earlier and stopped only because they'd run out of energy. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside. "Come in." She hesitated, like she'd expected an argument, then walked in slowly, looking around my living room, as if seeing it for the first time. Nothing fancy, clean, lived in. A house that functioned without trying to impress anyone. I offered her coffee. She shook her head. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd spent nights staring at public records and asking myself how long silence counted as complicity. She stared down at her hands. "I didn't come to apologize," she said quickly. "I don't even know how." "That's fine," I replied. "You don't have to." That surprised her. She let out a short laugh. "You always do that. You make it sound calm when it's not." "It is calm," I said. "It's just uncomfortable." She nodded like that landed. "I keep replaying it," she said. "The dinner. What I said. The way everyone looked at me afterward." I didn't respond. "I don't recognize myself," she continued. "I hear my own voice, and I don't know when it started sounding like that." I leaned back in my chair. "It didn't start that night." She winced. "I know." There was a long pause. Not awkward, heavy. "I was scared," she said finally, "all the time. Even when things looked good, of what I asked." She swallowed. "Of losing it, of people seeing the cracks, of ending up like you." I raised an eyebrow. "Say that again." She flushed. "I didn't mean—" "No," I said. "You did. Keep going." She looked down again. "You were okay. After Daniel died. Not happy, but steady. You didn't scramble. You didn't pretend." I thought about the nights I cried quietly, so Maya wouldn't hear. The mornings I forced myself out of bed because someone needed breakfast. Steady hadn't been effortless. "I didn't have a choice," I said. She nodded. "That's what terrified me." Her voice cracked. Everything I had was tied to how it looked. The house, the schools, the cars. When that started slipping, I panicked. And instead of dealing with it, I doubled down. "And took it out on my kid," I said. She flinched. "Yes." That was the first time she'd said it without qualifiers. "I didn't hate Maya," she said quickly. "I hated what she represented." I didn't interrupt. She was happy with less, Vanessa said. She wasn't chasing anything. And I kept thinking if my kids saw that they'd ask why we were killing ourselves to keep up. "So you pushed her away," I said. "Yes." She pressed her fingers into the table. "I thought if I drew the line clearly enough, I wouldn't have to explain myself." I thought about the card table. The way Maya had picked up her chair without waiting to be told. "You humiliated her," I said. "I know," Vanessa whispered. There was another pause. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I don't deserve that." I appreciated the honesty. "But I need you to understand something." She continued. "When you said what you said at that dinner, it didn't just expose my finances, it exposed me. To myself. That wasn't my goal," I said. "I know," she said. "That's why it worked." She wiped her face with her sleeve, unbothered by how it looked. I lost everything, she said. The house, the image, the friends who were only there for the show. I waited, and I deserved to lose the lie, she added quietly. That mattered. "I'm not here to fix anything," I said. "I'm not here to smooth this over." She nodded. "I know. What I care about," I continued, "is that Maya never feels like she has to earn a seat in her own family." "I won't do that again," Vanessa said immediately. "I swear." "Don't swear," I said. "Just don't do it." She nodded again. "I don't expect us to be close," she said. "I don't even know what that would look like now." "Neither do I," I replied. The truth hung between us. Not sharp, just solid. We sat there for a while longer, talking about logistics, about school schedules, about how her kids were adjusting, about practical things that didn't require emotion to navigate. Before she left, she stood awkwardly near the door. "I was jealous of you," she said, "for a long time." "I know," I replied. She blinked. "How?" "Because you never stopped trying to convince me you were better," I said. "People who are secure don't do that. That landed too." She gave a small nod, then turned to leave. After she was gone, I stood in the quiet kitchen for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Maya's video. The conversation hadn't fixed anything. It hadn't erased years of damage or magically reset our relationship, but it had stripped away the last layer of pretending. And sometimes that's the only honest place to start. Thanksgiving came without anyone announcing it was time to talk about what had happened. That alone told me things were different. The house was smaller this year. Vanessa's rental didn't have a formal dining room or matching chairs. The table was a little too short, the chairs didn't line up, and someone had to sit on a folding one pulled in from the garage. No one complained I brought a pie. Maya carried a bowl of mashed potatoes like it was an important assignment. Vanessa opened the door and stepped aside without commentary, without scanning the room, without directing traffic. That was new. The kids scattered immediately, shoes abandoned near the door. Maya followed them without hesitation. No pause. No glance back at me for permission. She just went. I noticed that before anything else. Vanessa watched too. Her shoulders relaxed a fraction when Maya settled in, easily laughing over something that didn't matter. Kids reset faster than adults when you stop feeding them poison. My mom hovered in the kitchen, offering help no one needed. She'd been doing that a lot lately, staying busy, staying useful, staying out of the way. Dinner was informal, loud in the way family dinners are supposed to be. Someone spilled a drink. Someone else laughed too hard. There were no speeches, no comparisons, no subtle jabs disguised as jokes. Vanessa asked Maya about school and actually waited for the answer. That mattered more than any apology. At one point, I caught my mom watching the kids, her expression thoughtful. "I didn't realize how much I let slide," she said quietly, standing next to me at the sink. I didn't rush to reassure her. She deserved the discomfort. "I thought I was keeping the peace," she added. "You were keeping things comfortable," I said. "For one person." She nodded slowly. "I see that now." That was enough. Later, while the kids were distracted with dessert, Vanessa stepped beside me on the porch. "I'm trying," she said. "I see that," I replied. "I don't expect you to trust me," she continued. "I wouldn't. I'm not measuring effort," I said. "I'm watching behavior." She nodded. "That's fair." The air was cold. The porch light buzzed faintly. We stood there without tension, which would have felt impossible months ago. Inside, Maya laughed loudly. Unself-conscious. Secure. That was the point. On the drive home, Maya leaned back in her seat, tired and content. "Aunt Vanessa was nice today," she said, like it surprised her. I noticed, I replied. "Do you think she changed because of that dinner?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. "I think she changed because she had to look at herself," I said. "Sometimes that takes losing things." Maya was quiet for a moment. "You weren't mean to her," she said. "No," I agreed. "I was honest." She seemed to think about that, then smiled and looked out the window. That night, after she was asleep, I sat on the couch with the lights off and thought about the word revenge. People imagine it as something loud, dramatic, final. That's not what this was. I didn't plan anything elaborate. I didn't set out to humiliate my sister. I didn't take pleasure in watching her life unravel. What I did was stop absorbing cruelty quietly. I stopped translating disrespect into something more polite. I stopped letting my daughter learn that love came with conditions. In the military, we talk about accountability constantly. About how rank doesn't protect you from consequences. About how systems fail when people cover for bad behavior instead of addressing it. Family isn't exempt from that. Vanessa didn't lose everything because of me. She lost it because it wasn't real to begin with. All I did was refuse to pretend otherwise once the line was crossed. My mom didn't suddenly become a different person, but she stopped excusing things she'd been excusing for years. And my daughter stopped sitting alone. That's the part that stays with me, not the shock on Vanessa's face, not the whispers at the table, not the way the room went quiet. It's the way Maya walked into that Thanksgiving dinner without hesitation, without scanning faces, without shrinking herself. That's what family revenge looks like when it's not about punishment. It's about protection. It's about drawing a line and holding it, even when it makes people uncomfortable. Especially then, because sometimes the most necessary consequences aren't loud, they're permanent. And they teach the people watching exactly what they deserve to expect from the people who claim to love them. If stories like this resonate with you, real family drama, honest revenge stories, and moments where people finally stand up for themselves, make sure to subscribe to the channel. More stories like this are coming. 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 Stories like this are coming.